private property started, because we had to turn land into a commodity, something that could be bought and sold. People had deeds or titles to the land. This is a relatively modern invention, at least for most people. You might have had titles and deeds for lords and nobles and kings, but you didn't have it for common people. I live here, I farm this land. There wasn't, let's say, a whole legal apparatus up there to kind of say which land belonged to which people. And then there's the issue of selling human activity. And this goes back to what we talked about, wage slavery. What's the difference between, labor, what we do, or activity? You can't separate it from the person, right? Where is your labor? It's not like it's stuck in your arm or resident in your muscles and you can cut it out and hand over. It's not separable from the person producing it. And it's not produced for market. We do things not because there's a market. We do things because we're people and that we move, we have activities. But the point is, how can you separate your labor from the actual person? And obviously you can't. So what's the difference between selling your labor or renting your labor and selling your body, being a slave or a prostitute or something of that sort? And first of all, this system is impossible before you have clocks, right? Labor is measured in time, right? You get paid by the hour. But if you don't have clocks, which you didn't really have before 1700 or so, reliable clocks, how can you sell time? How can you sell your labor before you can measure time? Once you measure time, you can start to have reliable clocks. Another thing is this, why do we oppose prostitution? Mostly because prostitution is selling yourself, and we think that's a bad thing to do. We also don't let people sell their organs. We let people give their organs away. We can donate your kidney or donate your blood, but in general, we don't let people make money. I can't give you my kidney and get money back. If I did, I would get a jail sentence and a large fine. There's also this saying from the Middle Ages that's particularly in German areas, that Stadtluft macht frei, which is that city air will make you free. And so it used to be that if you could escape your lord or noble in the Middle Ages and make your way to one of the free cities like Hamburg, you would become a free person. And you had this thing called burghers, and the word we use now today is bourgeoisie, which were free people who could vote in elections and didn't owe labor or work to some type of lord. And so this idea that most people do belong to the land, and it's your labor is not free. Right? If you're a serf or a slave, you have to do what someone's telling you to do. You really can't sell yourself. But when you're a free person working in a city, you can start to sell your labor. But this is not a natural or obvious thing, at least not until relatively recent. Now, I want to close with, this money as a medium of exchange and money as a store of value, and how, let's say, it works in the economy. Now, to go back to this idea that money is a medium of exchange, money is basically mediating between two different commodities, right? We had our chickens, we turned it into money, and we turned that money back into cows, right? Chickens are a commodity, cows are a commodity. Money is just kind of this lowest common denominator that, is a vehicle that transmits one commodity into another. And in this view of the world, money is neutral. It's a veil. It's just a placeholder for what underlying is basically a commodity exchange. And in this view, money is just basically liquidity. It functions by lubricating these economic exchanges. It greases the wheels. It makes it easier to turn cows into chickens and chickens into cows. And really all we need is loose money and small change, which means that we need money for transactions. The more transactions we have, the more money we need. But we just basically need it for a very kind of peripheral, and it's a neutral process. It doesn't change the underlying values of what these commodities that we're changing one thing for another. And so for money can't really make anything, it just basically converts. When I mean by small change, I'm talking about things like silver and pennies, because you could have loose money because you wanted a lot of money because it's kind of as I said, greasing the wheels. the more oil, the more lubricant you have on the wheels, the more frictionless and the more transactions are easier to make. And that's the liquidity. The money is living in liquidity. Now the other element, the other dimension of money, is that it's a store of value, and we might conflate this with its function as a unit of account and a store of value. And here what money is a hoard. Okay, it's a hoard of value, it's a store of value. Commodities become capital. So we start with money, we turn it into some commodity, i.e. we turn it into something and then we get more money back. Let me be a little more clear about this. This is what people basically in finance do. They have money, they convert it into commodities like houses or loans, or to some other, help people to buy commodities, right? I give you money so you can buy something and you're going to give me money back. That's basically what a loan is, right? And you have this little star here because something's being added to this process of circulation, right? The commodity doesn't, the money doesn't change the value in the CMC dynamic, but M to C to M, right? We think the money is increased in value. This is something different because now we're thinking people can make money from money. Well, money is no longer just a medium. It's actually something that can be purchased, right? I need money to purchase items. Or if I want to buy oil in the modern world, I have to have dollars, because all the oil transactions of the world are not say all, but almost all the oil transactions of the world are conducted in dollars. And so other countries have to have dollars to go purchase items. They can't just use their own currency. They can't just write IOU notes, really. And so what you have is this, first of all, that money is transformed into commodities, and that to make money from money, you have to make certain things that are not commodities into commodities so that they can, let's say, add value and therefore get you a return on your hoard of money, i.e. that hoard of money will actually grow in value. And so you have to turn nature into property and humans into labor and money into capital. And particularly Piero Sraffa wrote a book called The Production of Commodities by Commodities, kind of made this point that money is being turned into commodity and then that commodity is being turned into more money. But the question is, where is that extra money? Now, Marx would call it surplus value. Someone else might call it interest, but it's still kind of an, economists, how do you explain that there's more at the end than there was at the beginning? Where did this extra value come from? Now, Marx would say they squeeze it out of workers, right? Capitalism turns workers into a commodity and then squeezes that extra value out. Some people might say it's a rent, right? I turn nature or resources into a property, and i.e. that means I'm turning it into land or property, and therefore I can get a rent or a payback just by owning it. And some people would say there's what's called quasi-rents or quasi-rents, which is that if I own a resource like a machine or a factory, I earn a rent on that simply by owning that factory, even if I never really do anything with it. So this means that money, really becomes a commodity, or gets transformed into commodities, and so far so that money can be turned into more money. And this is also kind of explains why we have financial institutions, businesses that make money by lending money. That money then becomes a commodity because it's being used for something, and then we're paid back that money as an interest. And this is really why, financial institutions that are really trafficking, or their business models M to C to M, they're monopolists, right? They control most of the money. Or in some ways you could say they make money, but also that they have control over the flow of money in the economy. And of course people like this don't want loose money, because it's not about transactions. They want to make sure that money holds its value. And as a store of value, they want to make sure that, money is denominated in something that's relatively stable. And for most people, that's something called gold, i.e. that gold doesn't lose value, you can't debase it. It'll help preserve the value of your money and your money transactions over time. Now, let me just go back, and this is actually a diagram of that cooler ring that I showed you much earlier. And so, once again, this is like the circular flow model of the economy. You have, okay, the thin arrows are the goods, the stuff, and you can see it's going in one direction, and other stuff is going in the other direction. And you can see these little arrows which are tracing the money, right? You have two different goods going in two different directions, tracing two different commodities. Right? This is what a barter system basically looks like, because the money in the system is the necklaces and these arm shells is actually a commodity, right? It's just like gold. Money is a thing. It's given a form, not in a symbol, not by putting, let's say, $20 on a piece of paper, but actually trading something that we think has value. And so in the olden days, right, money would be weighed, right? You had those scales and you would test to see if it was really gold, because it did actually matter how much gold was in that coin. That's how you determine the value. So that's basically what a barter economy would look like. But let's say, for example, we kind of put a financial intermediary into this system. So you can see on this diagram on the top there's C. And if you notice, what's different here from the previous graph is there's no goods. They don't want stuff. So the point is, though, what they are doing is they're passing money through. So if they decide to, let's say, not take money, this flow breaks down because the money is no longer circulating. But these people are basically taking in money and paying out money. And then arguably maybe they're taking like a little bit of cut, and they're making money from having money. This is essentially what a bank is in most modern economies. They're not interested in making actual things. They're mostly making money off money. And they have a very important, they could say, stranglehold in the economy, because at any given time they can say, sorry, since we're not interested really in things, we're going to stop circulating this money. It's too much of a problem. And they can basically cut off this flow of, let's say, purchasing power through the system. Now, this might lead to a situation like we have in this third chart, where basically you don't have a system and you fall back into bilateral exchanges, right? Money, one trade good, going back and forth, but there's no circulation, and this could, let's say, make the economy work a lot less efficiently. And this is why people like banks and financial institutions have such a dominant role in the economy, because they can basically go on strike, essentially, and refuse to, let's say, circulate money. And you see this right now in the current situation where you have firms with a lot of cash on their balance sheets, and you have banks that have a lot of deposits, a lot of reserves, but they're not loaning it out. They're not putting it back into circulation. And as a result, you have a lot of purchasing power that's going unused, that could be used but is not going unused. I'm not saying that necessarily should, but I'm saying is that financial institutions, because they're not really in the trade in goods, physical, tangible goods, can kind of basically boycott in a way that is not necessarily going to hurt them. Labor has to actually work, because if it doesn't feed itself, it dies. But money can just stay in the vault and at least sort of hold its own value. So let me just give you use that diagram to understand something that's going on. May help you understand the American economy and things